So for our deep dive today, we're looking at a claim that just exploded almost immediately. Did a U.S. Congresswoman's son get racially profiled in a traffic stop?
What?
Or was that very claim a smokescreen for something else entirely?
That's really the question, isn't it? It's this incredible collision of two narratives. On one hand, you have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She's claiming that agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
The enforcement arm of Homeland Security.
Exactly. She says they pulled over her son, Adnan Hirsi, right there in the Twin Cities, and she framed it as clear-cut systemic racial targeting.
But the other side of that collision came fast.
Yeah,
And it came hard.
it really did. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons issued just a blanket denial. He said the agency has, and I'm quoting here, absolutely zero record of the stop. He basically called it a political stunt meant to vilify ICE.
So our mission today is to try and navigate this, to unpack these two completely conflicting stories.
And we have to ground them in the political context of what's happening in Minneapolis-St. Paul. I mean, you have to understand why this one kind of unverified story became such a flashpoint in a city already dealing with, frankly, massive accusations of financial fraud.
Okay, let's start with the allegation itself. What exactly did Congresswoman Omar say happened to her son?
So the story came out pretty quickly after the incident, which was supposed to have happened on Saturday, December 13th, 2025. According to her son, he's 19, he was driving home after leaving a Target in the metro area, and that's when he was pulled over by officers she specifically identified as ICE agents.
And what was the reason given for the stop, at least in her version of events?
She was explicit. She said it was racial profiling, the idea being that there was no other reason for the stop other than him being a young Somali American man. And she claimed they only let him go after he showed them proof of his U.S. citizenship.
And he did that by showing his passport. That detail always stood out
It's
to her.
very specific detail. She made a point to say he always carries it.
Which, for a 19-year-old in the U.S. just running to Target, carrying your passport, instead of just a driver's license, that feels unusual. It suggests you're almost expecting an interaction like this.
It does, and Omar used that to amplify the incident. She immediately tied it to the broader political climate, saying it was proof that the Trump administration was, targeting the Somali American community in Minnesota.
She didn't just tweet about it either. She took it to the federal level, right? A letter to DHS.
A formal letter, yeah. To the Department of Homeland Security, accusing the agents of blatant racial profiling and using unnecessary force. But this is where the two stories they completely diverge.
Yeah, a complete split.
Because the official response from ICE was incredibly fast and very, very forceful. Acting Director Lyons went public and just flatly denied it. He said they did a complete review, patrol logs, agency records, communications, and found, quote, no evidence of any stop involving her son, period.
So not a we're looking into it or we can't confirm. It's a direct, documented denial.
A very direct denial. And he didn't stop there. He went on to question her motives, criticizing her for making these really serious accusations without any proof at all.
He said it speaks volumes.
It does, that an elected official would make a claim like that with, as he put it, zero proof.
So what was the political subtext there? I mean, he was clearly sending a message.
Oh, absolutely. He basically called it a political hit job, something designed specifically to vilify IC and discredit their work. He just dismissed the whole thing as a PR stunt.
So after that very direct challenge, did Omar's team, provide any new evidence? Dash cam footage? A witness? Anything?
No, they just doubled down. Her spokesperson came out and stuck to the story that he was racially profiled, that he had to show his passport.
And their explanation for the lack of records?
They turned it back on the agency. They basically said IC is a rogue agency and their records are so bad, it's no surprise that an agency known for disappearing people also can't keep its records straight.
So the argument becomes, the stop happened, and the fact that there's no record just proves how corrupt or incompetent IC is.
Exactly, which creates this incredible credibility gap for anyone trying to follow the story. You have an elected official's personal story versus a federal agency's documented denial.
And you said earlier this didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
To really get why this was so explosive, we have to look at the other fires burning in her district at the time.
Huge fires. I mean, her political standing was under immense pressure because of these enormous financial scandals.
Wait, let's talk about that context, because we're not talking about small-time stuff. This is systemic fraud. Hundreds of millions of dollars.
The scale is just staggering. The biggest one, the one that got all the headlines, was centered on a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future. It was supposed to be running child nutrition programs, feeding low-income kids during the pandemic.
So how did they allegedly steal the money?
Well, the oversight was very relaxed during the pandemic to get aid out faster, and prosecutors say these groups exploited that. They set up shell companies, created fake invoices.
For phantom children, basically.
Were phantom children at phantom sites, yeah. They'd submit paperwork saying they were serving thousands of meals a day out of like a tiny storefront or an apartment. It was physically impossible.
Just rampant overbilling with minimal checks.
Precisely. And the total that prosecutors allege was stolen from that one program, it's an astronomical $250 million.
$250 million. That is just a stunning figure. And to bring it back to this specific controversy, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, he put a statistic on it.
He did. He said that of the, over 80 people indicted in that scheme,
Yeah.
90% of them were from Omar's Somali community in the Twin Cities.
And that wasn't the only case, right? It sounded like every few months there was a new one.
It wasn't. There were also tens of millions stolen from Minnesota's autism treatment program, again, by individuals from the Somali migrant community. And then another report suggested over $550 million was stolen from the state's COVID relief program.
So you add it all up, the $250 million, the tens of millions, the $550 million, you are well over $750 million in taxpayer money. Gone. All from the same general area.
And when you're facing that level of, proven corruption, it creates a very powerful incentive for a political leader to try and change the subject.
And Omar's response to criticism about this has always been to frame it as bigotry.
She consistently dismisses it as hate and fear-mongering.
Her political opponents, of course, see it very differently. Tom Emmer, again, he didn't pull any punches. He called her a con artist.
He said she doesn't have clean hands on this at all, and even claimed she helped create the Feeding Our Future program in the first place.
So the narrative coming from the right is pretty clear.
Crystal clear. That she is using this explosive but totally unproven ICE allegation to demonize law enforcement and, more importantly, to distract everyone from the massive, verifiable financial crimes happening in her own backyard. It's an alleged crisis designed to distract from a proven one.
And this really is a perfect example of how immigration enforcement is no longer just about, enforcing laws. It's a front in the culture war.
A very potent one. It's about mobilizing your base, delegitimizing your opponents.
We should also acknowledge, though, the rhetoric from the other side. Former President Trump was very aggressive on this.
Oh, absolutely. He specifically targeted the Somali immigrant community in Minnesota, used some really derogatory language saying he doesn't want them in our country.
Right.
And, that kind of talk naturally created a climate of fear and coincided with ICE stepping up enforcement in the Twin Cities.
Which brings us to the legal reality on the ground. For an ICE agent to pull over a car, what's the standard they have to meet?
It's actually a pretty low bar, legally speaking. It's reasonable suspicion of a crime or an immigration violation.
Which is lower than probable cause.
Much lower. And while ethnicity alone isn't legally enough for a stop, it can be a factor in what they call the totality of circumstances.
That is a gray area.
A huge gray area. And that's where these fights over racial profiling always start.
And we also know that ICE tactics can be, they can be opaque. Immigrant rights groups have documented this pretty thoroughly.
They have. Groups like the Immigrant Defense Project or IDP, they report on officers using unmarked cars, plain clothes.
So it's not always obvious who is stopping you.
Not at all. They report aggressive tactics, too, like blocking cars, even breaking windows sometimes. And crucially, they sometimes report that officers will claim they're from the narcotics squad or some other agency, which really messes up the paper trail.
That issue of poor record keeping, it's not just coming from Omar's side. You have Democrats in Congress.
Right, like Senator Elizabeth Warren and others. They've been pressuring DHS for years over reports of U.S. citizens getting detained in sweeps.
And their main issue is the records.
It's the exact same issue. They cite poor record keeping and a systemic failure by ICE to verify citizenship. So the idea that ICE's documentation is flawed is, it's a bipartisan concern in a way.
So that creates this really complicated picture for us.
Yeah.
On one side, you have very real documented concerns about ICE's tactics and record keeping, which makes a story like Omar's seem plausible.
Plausible, sure.
But on the other hand, in this specific case, you have the head of the agency making a very public, very direct, and documented denial. saying there is a complete vacuum of documentation.
And that is the central conflict for you, the listener, to sort through. You've got a U.S. representative's personal, unproven story, a story that perfectly fits her political narrative.
Right.
And it's set against a federal agency's total denial, all while these huge, verifiable fraud scandals are the real headline news in her district.
This deep dive really shows just how much immigration policy has become a weapon in partisan fights.
It's completely weaponized. Allegations, true or not, are used to rally the base, to control the news cycle, and maybe to distract from other things.
The question stops being, what really happened that day?
And it becomes a much more political one. Who benefits when a story about victimization drowns out a much more complicated story about financial corruption?
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider.
Wow.
When a political leader makes a serious, unproven accusation against a federal agency, what does that do to public trust in the long run? Not just trust in law enforcement, but in our political leaders themselves, especially when hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars have verifiably gone missing in their own district.